In the damp darkness of a Brooklyn alley, eyes meet. Three drunken high school men. A billionaire female CEO walled in with no way out, and a 22-year-old black waitress, bare-handed, eyes blazing like fire. No one expected that just one moment, a whole glass bottle, would set off a chain of events that would change the fates of both women and the formulas of every prejudice this society applies. Don't leave your eyes. This is not just a bite. This is the beginning of a story that will keep you thinking until the last second. The rain in Brooklyn that night wasn't gentle. It came in sheets, hammering rooftops, flooding curbs, leaving steam rising from manhole covers. Streetlights flickered against puddles that reflected the city like broken glass. It was one of those nights where the city felt alive, restless, whispering secrets in the echo of footsteps on wet pavement. Behind King's Prime Steakhouse, a popular but unglamorous restaurant off Flatbush Avenue, three men cornered a woman against the brick wall of a narrow alley. Their laughter was sharp, cruel, the kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl. The woman pressed her palms to the bricks behind her as though she could vanish into them. Her eyes, dark, steady but disenchanted, betrayed her fear. She was small in stature, her silk blouse torn at the shoulder, her hair pinned but unraveling in the wet night air. "Hey!" one of the men barked. "You understand English? Or do you only spy for your people?" He spat the words with venom. Another chimed in, slurring from drink. "Go back where you came from. We don't need your kind here. Little foreign bitch." The third one didn't laugh. He pressed closer, towering over her, hand hovering too close to her shoulder. The way he moved made it clear he wasn't here just to scare. He wanted to dominate, humiliate, erase her dignity. The woman didn't fight back. Not yet. Her lips trembled, but she stood upright, spine locked. She didn't scream. That calm only seemed to infuriate them more. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that this was Aiko Sakamoto, billionaire founder of one of the world's fastest-growing AI companies. But here, in the shadows of a Brooklyn alley, she wasn't a CEO, wasn't a headline. She was just a woman, foreign, vulnerable, alone. And the men saw only that. From the back door of the steakhouse, Khloe McKinley had just stepped out. She carried a black garbage bag slung over one shoulder, her sneakers squeaking against the wet ground. 22 years old, barely scraping by, Khloe was the kind of woman the world rarely noticed. A waitress. A shadow in black uniform, hair tied tight, apron stained by endless shifts. But that night she noticed everything. She heard the raised voices before she saw them. She knew those tones, the mockery, the sneer. It was the same tone she'd heard tossed casually at her in dining rooms filled with men in suits. The same laugh she'd endured when customers snapped their fingers at her like she was less than human. Her stomach tightened. She dropped the trash bag, the sound muffled by the rain, her eyes fixed on the scene. Three men, one woman, cornered. The woman's dark hair clung to her face in strands. Her blouse was soaked, plastered against her skin. And that look, terrified yet stubborn, stirred something deep inside Khloe. She knew that look because it lived inside her too. Khloe's grandmother Pearl had once told her, "There will come a time when you'll have to decide who you are. Not who they say you are, but who you really are. That moment will come suddenly, baby girl." Don't let it pass. Khloe had never known what Pearl meant. Not until now. Something inside her snaps, not with fear, but with recognition. Her hand moved before her mind could catch up. She grabbed the nearest thing at her feet. An empty bottle, cracked at the base, left behind by some drunk earlier. She gripped it so tightly her knuckles went pale. The man closest to the woman reached for her arm. Khloe's heart pounded, thunder loud in her ears. She stepped forward, arm pulled back, and with all the force years of swallowed anger had built inside her, she threw. The bottle slices the air, spinning fast. It hit the ringleader square across the cheek with a sickening crack. Blood, shock, silence. The men stumbled back, shouting curses. One held his face, blood streaming between his fingers. The other two turned, finally noticing the figure at the mouth of the alley. A young black woman, soaked to the bone. Barefoot now, her shoes slipping as she had charged forward, her chest heaving with adrenaline. Her voice tore through the rain, raw and unshakable. If you're going to lay a hand on her, you'll have to go through every damn woman this city has overlooked. You touch her again, and I swear I'll make you regret it. It wasn't a cop's warning. It wasn't a bodyguard's command. It was the voice of a waitress, a survivor, a fighter who'd had enough. For a frozen moment, time seemed suspended. The three men stared at her. The woman against the wall blinked, her breath visible in the cool night air. Khloe's pulse raced. Fear gnawed at her edges, but something else burned stronger. Fury. A lifetime of being ignored, of shrinking, of smiling politely while her dignity was chipped away. Tonight, the dam had broken. The men cursed, one of them stepping forward. Khloe didn't flinch. She broadened her stance, fists clenched, eyes blazing like coals. The rain streaked her face, but the rain lingered through the night. By dawn, Brooklyn's streets glistened as though the city had tried to wash itself clean, but failed. Behind King's Prime Steakhouse, the narrow alley still bore the marks of the struggle. Footprints stamped into the wet grime, streaks of diluted blood glowing faintly under a flickering street lamp. Khloe remained there longer than she should have. Her chest had steadied, but her hands still trembled, unwilling to forget. Shards of glass from the bottle she had thrown scattered across the pavement, reflecting the dull orange of the streetlight like tiny broken suns. She couldn't name what she felt. Fear? Maybe. But layered beneath that was something stronger, something hotter. A flame. A flame that had not been lit by the bottle. It had been burning inside her for years. Khloe McKinley was never the kind of girl people looked at and thought, hero. She had grown up used to stepping aside, to holding her tongue when misnamed, mislabeled, dismissed. In Georgia classrooms, when she raised her hand too eagerly, teachers sighed or rolled their eyes. Sometimes they told her she was too loud. Sometimes they cut her off mid-sentence. When her mother died at 7, Khloe's world collapsed into silence. She lived with her grandmother, Pearl, a woman whose hair turned silver early, but whose eyes never dulled. Pearl taught her that worth was not handed down by others. It was something you defended by standing tall, even when the world tried to press you flat. Baby, Pearl used to say, there will be days you feel so small no one even sees you. That's when you remember, you're not small at all. You carry a whole mountain behind your back. Those words became scripture in Khloe's heart. Yet in Brooklyn's grinding chaos, they were often just enough to keep her upright, not enough to lift her out. The morning after the storm, Khloe slipped into her black button-up shirt, her slim trousers, her coffee-stained apron. The restaurant buzzed like always. Clattering dishes, orders barked over jazz music that no one really listened to. Khloe balanced trays and memorized details. The man at table 5 wanted his coffee black, no sugar. The woman in the back corner always asked for lemon slices in her water. Little things, small enough to be invisible, yet they made her feel she could still make someone feel seen. But invisibility had a way of biting back. As she passed, a man snapped his fingers. Hey, girl! More napkins. Hurry it up. The word girl stung. It always did. Still, Khloe forced a smile, nodded, and kept walking. Yet the image from last night would not fade. The cruel laughter, the Japanese woman's terrified eyes, and the bottle leaving Khloe's hand like a decision made by her very soul. Across the city, in a high-rise hotel, Aiko Sakamoto sat by her window. Her silk blouse from last night had been discarded, replaced with a simple robe. But the smell of rain, of liquor-soaked breath, of humiliation clung to her skin. Aiko had never feared shadows. She had built a career in rooms colder than this city's night. But what gnawed at her was the helplessness, her body small against the bricks, their words like knives. She remembered every face, the tattoos, the red flush of alcohol, the leader's bearded scowl. She also remembered with startling clarity the waitress, drenched, defiant, holding a broken bottle like it was destiny. Her lips parted softly as she whispered to the empty room, "Who is she?" The days that followed felt heavier for both women. Khloe moved through the motions at the steakhouse, but her mind kept circling back. Her hands remembered the bottle's weight, the recoil in her wrist, the way her heart hammered. What if she hadn't moved? What would have happened to that woman? And Aiko, buried in her schedule of boardrooms and contracts, found herself haunted by the same thought in reverse. What if the girl hadn't been there? Neither woman called it fate, but both felt the same truth. That alley was more than an accident. It was a doorway neither could close. 3 days later, as Khloe was wiping down tables before the lunch rush, the sound of a car engine pulled her eyes to the front window. A black luxury sedan idled outside, its windows tinted like mirrors. The door opened with deliberate grace. Stepping out was a figure Khloe recognized instantly. Not the rain-soaked, cornered stranger from the alley, but the same woman transformed, Aiko Sakamoto. Her slate gray coat cut elegantly across her frame, her posture poised, her steps certain. Inside the steakhouse, the noise dimmed as though the world itself was watching. Aiko's gaze swept the room, then landed on Khloe. A subtle, almost human smile touched her lips. "Miss McKinley?" she asked, her voice soft but unwavering. Khloe froze, dishcloth still in her hand. "Yes, that's me. We need to talk." They sat in a cafe 2 blocks away, small enough to keep prying eyes out, quiet enough to hear the rain still pattering against the glass. Aiko asked questions about Khloe's family, her art, her dreams. Her tone was measured, respectful, the way people in Khloe's world rarely spoke to her. At first, Khloe answered cautiously, but something in Aiko's listening, her stillness, her patience, drew honesty out like a thread. Then came the words that left Khloe breathless. "I want you to work for me." "Not here, not serving tables, at my company, at Neuron Spark." "I need someone like you." Khloe blinked, her heart beat like a drum. "Work for her? A billionaire CEO?" It sounded unreal, almost cruel in its generosity. Her eyes dropped to her apron, to the stubborn coffee stain that would never wash out. Then she lifted them to Aiko's face, searching for pity. There was none, only respect. In that moment, Khloe realized she stood at the edge of something she had never dared to imagine. The alley had been the beginning. This was the next step. The city did not pause for anyone. Not for billionaires, not for waitresses, not even for storms that swept the streets clean overnight. By the time Khloe McKinley found herself stepping into the lobby of Neuron Spark's Manhattan headquarters, Brooklyn already felt like another lifetime. The building loomed above her like a shard of glass stabbing into the sky. Its surface mirrored the clouds, swallowing the sunlight, and when she pushed through the revolving doors, it felt as though she was stepping into a different climate, sleek, chilled, weightless. Inside, the air hummed with the muted thrum of innovation. Walls of glass divided open workspaces where people in suits tapped furiously at laptops, voices low but urgent. Screens lit up with lines of code and data graphs that moved faster than her eyes could follow. Everyone seemed to walk with purpose, badges clipped neatly to their clothes, coffee cups in hand, eyes darting from one meeting to the next. Khloe tugged at the edge of her black blazer, borrowed from a thrift store the night before. Beneath it, her only pair of clean trousers and a blouse that still smelled faintly of detergent. She had scrubbed her hands so hard that morning they looked raw, as if she could wash the steakhouse off her skin. But the coffee stain on her old apron still burned in her memory, a reminder of who she was just 3 days ago. Aiko met her at the lobby. No chauffeur this time, no entourage, just Aiko herself. Calm, steady, dressed in a charcoal blazer, her long hair swept back into a simple bun. "You came," Aiko said softly, not as a question, but as recognition. Khloe nodded. "You asked." A faint smile touched the CEO's lips before she gestured for Khloe to follow. They walked side by side through glass corridors. Khloe caught glimpses of her own reflection, slender frame dwarfed by towering walls, her curly hair pulled back into a bun that felt too casual, her dark skin stark against the pale lights. She felt every step echo like a trespass. At one corner, 2 employees paused to whisper. Khloe felt the weight of their eyes sliding over her, assessing, dismissing. Her chest tightened, but when she looked at Aiko, the woman's stride never faltered, as if she had long ago grown deaf to whispers. "Do they always look at you like that?" Khloe asked quietly. Not always, Aiko replied. Sometimes worse. The office Aiko led her to wasn't large, but its walls were transparent, like every other room in the building. Khloe found herself standing in a cube of glass, where privacy was an illusion and judgment was constant. This will be your desk, Aiko explained. Temporary. You'll shadow me, learn the flow, mostly scheduling, organizing, listening. Listening is most important. Khloe lowered herself into the sleek leather chair. It felt too soft, too expensive. She smoothed her trousers nervously, glancing at the tablet on the desk already glowing with unread messages. Listening, she repeated. Aiko's eyes softened. You listened that night in the alley. That's why you acted before anyone else would. I need that same instinct here, Khloe swallowed hard. But I don't know anything about this world. The meetings, the code, you know how to stand your ground. Aiko cut in gently. That's rarer than you think. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city outside. Khloe's heart pounded in her ears, but beneath the fear was a spark of something else. Possibility. Her first trial came sooner than expected. That afternoon, Aiko invited Khloe into a strategy meeting. The conference room was a polished cavern of glass and steel, a long table surrounded by men in sharp suits. Their watches gleamed, their voices were sharp, their laughter pointed. Khloe hesitated at the doorway until Aiko gave her the smallest nod, and she stepped inside. Eyes turned, some curious, some amused. One man leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Assistant?" as if the word were a punchline. Khloe sat at the far end, clutching a notepad like a shield. She scribbled furiously as acronyms and projections flew across the table. None of it made sense, but she kept writing, kept listening. Halfway through, Aiko paused mid-sentence. "Miss McKinley," she said, her voice clear. "What do you think?" The room stilled. Khloe froze, every eye locking onto her. Her throat tightened, words caught behind her teeth. But then she remembered Pearl's voice. "You carry a whole mountain behind your back." She lifted her gaze. "I don't know the numbers yet," she admitted, "but I do know this. If you're talking about building something for people, and you never once said the word people, you might be missing the point." Silence. A flush of heat crawled up Khloe's neck. Then to her shock, Aiko nodded. "Good insight," Aiko said simply, before turning back to the agenda. The meeting rolled on, but no one laughed at Khloe again. Later that evening, as Khloe gathered her things, she overheard two executives in the hallway. "So that's the girl from the alley?" one murmured. "Yeah," the other replied with a smirk. "Aiko's little rescue project." Khloe's stomach twisted. Her fingers clenched around her notepad until the pages crumpled. She wanted to storm out, to shout, to demand respect. But instead, she walked quickly to the elevator, her breath sharp and shallow. When the doors closed, she finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Her reflection in the steel doors looked back at her, tired, small, but still burning. That night, Aiko found her in the lobby, staring out at the city lights. "They'll keep whispering," Aiko said softly. "They've whispered about me for years. Too foreign, too serious, too much, too little. It never ends." Khloe turned toward her, eyes shimmering with both frustration and fatigue. "How do you stand it?" Aiko's gaze was steady. "By remembering who I am, and by choosing carefully who I let remind me. Tonight, I choose you." For a moment, Khloe felt her chest loosen. The ache didn't vanish, but it dulled beneath the weight of Aiko's trust. The next morning, Khloe walked into the office with a new resolve. Her hands still shook when she held her notepad, but her spine was straighter. She looked at the glass walls differently, not as prisons, but as mirrors. If they were going to watch her, let them. For the first time in her life, Khloe McKinley felt she might belong at the table, not because someone allowed her to sit, but because she had carried her mountain all the way here. The storm was behind her, but the fight was only beginning. The invitation arrived like a whisper of another world. Khloe found it resting on her desk, heavy cardstock embossed with silver lettering. Annual Tech Horizons Gala, Manhattan Rooftop. She had never held paper that thick before. It felt expensive in her hands, like holding a brick of a house she could never afford. The print gleamed under the office lights, elegant and cold. When Aiko appeared at her side, Khloe lifted the envelope with a sheepish look. I don't think this was meant for me, she murmured. Aiko's eyes softened. It was. You're coming with me. Khloe's stomach twisted. A gala? She pictured glittering gowns, champagne glasses, words she didn't understand floating over polished marble floors. She imagined herself in jeans and her work-worn shoes out of place, a shadow that didn't belong in the light. I don't have, she began. Then we'll make sure you do, Aiko interrupted gently. Her tone left no room for refusal. 2 nights later, Khloe stood in front of a mirror in a borrowed silk blouse and tailored black slacks Aiko had insisted on. Her curly hair, usually tied in a bun, had been smoothed back into a low ponytail. She looked different, like someone rehearsing for a role they didn't quite know. You look strong, Aiko said when she appeared. Khloe gave a crooked smile. I feel like a fraud. Aiko tilted her head. Strength often feels like fraud until you realize it's yours. The Gala rooftop was a cathedral of glass and light, perched high above Manhattan. Chandeliers glittered like constellations. The skyline burned with 1,000 windows reflecting the city's restless fire. Waiters glided through the crowd carrying trays of champagne, their movements as rehearsed as ballet. Khloe kept close behind Aiko as they entered. Eyes flicked toward them, first toward the billionaire in her midnight blue gown, then toward the unfamiliar young woman at her side. Whispers rippled like waves. This is Miss McKinley. She works with me. Khloe nodded, her voice small but steady. Good evening. Some smiled politely. Others scanned her up and down with thinly veiled curiosity. One man leaned toward another and muttered, That's the girl from the alley. The words clung to the air like smoke. The cruel laughter. Near the bar, Khloe overheard 2 of Aiko's longtime advisors. Their voices were smooth with liquor, sharp with arrogance. Aiko's little rescue project, one sneered. Cute story, the other chuckled. Makes her look generous. The press will love it. Khloe's cheeks burned. Her chest hollowed out, leaving her breath shallow and uneven. She turned her face away, gripping the edge of her glass so tightly her knuckles whitened. When she caught her reflection in the window, she barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes shimmering with humiliation, smile trembling at the corners. Khloe slipped out before the speeches began. The night air on the stairwell was cold, biting. She descended quickly, heels clicking against the marble, each step louder than the last. By the time she reached the street, her chest felt like it was caving in. In the silence of her tiny apartment, she peeled off the silk blouse, folded it with trembling hands and pushed it into the back of her drawer as though it had burned her. She turned off her phone. The city outside pulsed with neon and noise, but inside she curled on her couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling small again, smaller than she had in years. Late the next afternoon, a knock broke the silence. Khloe hesitated, then opened the door a crack. Aiko stood there. No chauffeur, no entourage, just her. They think you saved me, Aiko said softly. But the truth is, you gave me something I had almost forgotten. Courage that isn't wrapped in wealth or titles. Don't let people who don't matter decide your worth. Khloe's throat tightened. Her eyes blurred, but she blinked hard, forcing herself to meet Aiko's steady gaze. For the first time since the gala, Khloe felt her chest loosen, not because the pain had gone, but because someone had seen it and named it for what it was. Not weakness, but proof she was alive in a world that wanted her invisible. That night, Khloe didn't reach for the silk blouse. Instead, she pulled out the envelope under her mattress labeled Studio Fund. The bills were still there, small and crumpled, but now they felt less like scraps and more like seeds. She thought of Pearl's words. You carry a mountain behind your back. Maybe the mountain wasn't meant to crush her. Maybe it was meant to lift her. And for the first time in days, she opened her sketchbook. Her pencil scratched across the page, lines fierce and unyielding. The figure that emerged was a phoenix, rising not from fire, but from blue flames, wings wide, eyes ablaze. Khloe stared at it and whispered almost to herself, maybe this is where it begins. The story from the alley refused to stay hidden. Within days, headlines spread everywhere. Billionaire CEO saved in Brooklyn alley by local waitress. Aiko's polished photo appeared beside a blurry shot of Khloe. The internet exploded with hashtags, some praising her as a hero, others mocking her as a stunt. Khloe hated it. She hadn't asked for the spotlight. The media storm reporters called nonstop. Invitations poured in. Khloe wanted to decline everything, but Aiko reminded her, if we stay silent, they'll write the story for us. So they agreed to one interview. On stage, the host smirked. So, Miss McKinley, what's it like going from carrying trays to carrying a billionaire's life? The audience laughed. Khloe froze, but Aiko cut in. She didn't save a billionaire. She saved a woman. The room went quiet. Khloe's voice finally found its strength. I didn't throw that bottle to be called a hero. I did it because I know what it feels like to be ignored, and I refuse to let it happen again. This time, the applause was real. The Rooftop Summit. At the National Tech Leadership Summit, Aiko was meant to speak. Instead, she turned to Khloe. It's your turn. Heart racing, Khloe stepped up. For years, I was invisible. Just, hey girl. But that night, I chose not to stay silent. Courage isn't an accident. It's a choice. When she finished, the rooftop erupted in a standing ovation. Not polite, but powerful. The applause from the summit lingered in Khloe's ears long after the rooftop lights faded. For days, she carried it like an echo, a reminder that her voice had finally been heard, not as a waitress, not as a novelty, but as herself. But applause, she soon learned, was fleeting. What remained was the work. Weeks later, Khloe found herself on a creaky porch in Georgia, the air thick with honeysuckle and summer heat. Her grandmother Pearl sat beside her, hands folded over her lap, eyes sharp as ever. I saw you on the television, Pearl said softly. The whole world watching my baby girl standing tall. Khloe laughed, brushing at tears she didn't expect. I wasn't trying to be famous, Grandma. Just trying not to disappear, Pearl squeezed her hand. You didn't just appear, Khloe. You burned. You carried that mountain all the way to the stage. Khloe leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder, the weight of everything finally softening into something that felt like peace. Back in Brooklyn, she and Aiko sat in their favorite corner cafe, papers scattered across the small wooden table. Aiko, composed as always, outlined the plan. We'll call it the Blue Phoenix Fund, Aiko said. Not just scholarships, mentorship, mental health support, micro grants for women who need to be believed in, not just saved. Khloe traced a finger over the sketch in her notebook. The blue flames, the rising wings. It's not about rescuing anyone, Khloe added. It's about reminding them the fire was already inside. They looked at each other then, and for the first time, neither felt alone in their fight. Months later, Khloe stood backstage at another summit. Microphone clipped, hands trembling, just like before. But this time, she wasn't speaking only about what happened in an alley. She was speaking about what came after. The fun, the women they'd met, the stories that multiplied like sparks catching dry grass. She stepped forward and told them, I thought courage was something rare, something you only found in a single desperate moment. But I was wrong. Courage is ordinary. It's saying no when silence would be safer. It's believing your voice matters even when the world tells you it doesn't. And sometimes courage is contagious. That night in Brooklyn, I thought I was standing alone. I wasn't. I was part of something bigger, something rising. The crowd rose with her words, a standing ovation that shook the hall. Later that night, when the applause had died and the lights had dimmed, Khloe walked home through Brooklyn streets slick with rain. Neon lights reflected in puddles, steam curled from manhole covers. It felt almost like the night it all began. But this time, she wasn't carrying trash bags behind a steakhouse. She was carrying purpose. She whispered to the night, to the city, maybe even to the girl she used to be. I'm not the story. I'm the storyteller. And for the first time, the city seemed to listen. Message to the audience. So what does this mean for us? For you watching this now? It means courage isn't locked in alleyways or boardrooms. It doesn't belong only to billionaires or headlines. It belongs to anyone who chooses not to stay silent. Maybe your mountain feels heavy. Maybe the world has made you small. But like Khloe McKinley, You carry fire in your eyes, strength in your bones, and a story the world needs to hear. The question is, will you speak it? Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If Khloe and Aiko's story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Let it remind someone else that kindness isn't weakness, that courage can start anywhere, even in the back alley of a steakhouse. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, Hidden Worth, where we tell true stories that reveal the power inside ordinary people. Because sometimes the smallest act of defiance can light a fire big enough to change the world.
Yeah.